On Sunday, the 4th of September 2022, more than 70,000 people have demonstrated in Prague in favor of Russia. You heard that right. These 70,000 people were calling for their country, the Czech Republic, to give in to Russia and stop sanctioning it in exchange for the return of cheap natural gas. Think about it. The Czechs were invaded by the Russians for decades. I mean, come on. They know what it means to be a colony of Russia. If this is what is happening in the Czech Republic, imagine the situation in other European countries that have not experienced Russian occupation. In France, they have also had similar protests. And in Spain, where Ukraine is quite far away, some voices seem to be asking for something similar. Pay attention to what the former Vice President of Spain, Pablo Iglesias, is saying.
Los ciudadanos europeos van a tener que seguir pagando una fractura social demasiado alta para la propia estabilidad de la Unión Europea.
But why do some people want to give in to Russia? The answer is simple. Europe seems to be heading for a gasmageddon. If you remember, a few weeks ago we released a video here on VisualPolitik where we talked about the natural gas crisis. On the 1st of September, Russia announced that it was cutting off all gas passing through the Nord Stream pipeline. Not 20%, not 10%, the total supply. 0% of Russian gas arriving in Germany. While it is true that some Russian gas is still arriving through Ukraine and Turkey, we are talking about a much smaller supply. The fact is that since the start of the war in Ukraine, Moscow has been progressively reducing gas supplies to Europe as a means of applying pressure.
Putin is using energy as a weapon by cutting supply and manipulating our energy markets. He will fail. Europe will prevail. Ursula von der Leyen.
In other words, recession in Europe is almost inevitable. And so is gas rationing. Let's put it plainly. We are in an energy war with Russia. Instead of sending all Europeans to a Siberian gulag, Putin has sent a little bit of Serbia to all of their homes. This also affects electricity. We are all seeing how electricity bills are skyrocketing. In some, we are talking about paying up to 2, 3, or even 4 times more than what we were paying before. And as you can imagine, many are panicking about what could be the coldest and most expensive winter of our lives. A real gasmageddon. And all while this is going on, Russia seems to be resisting the impact of the sanctions, or at least that's how it appears. Or rather, that's what the Kremlin insists on showing. For example, while Europe is racking its brains to see how to respond to the gas crisis, Putin has just inaugurated one of the largest gas pipelines in Europe, the Moscow Sun. And Putin keeps assuring that Russia has not lost and will not lose anything. So the temptation for many is, what if we give up? Obviously this question is out of the question. If Europe surrenders to Putin, there would be nothing to stop him from invading other countries in the future. But not only that, what if I told you that the price to be paid would not be that high? To put it another way, do we actually have a problem here? Yes, but much less than gasmageddon that many people imagine. For example, take a look at this graph. What you can see here are the Dutch TTF gas futures, the gas price benchmark. If you notice, the gas price peak came on August 26th. That is 4 days before the total cutoff of Russian gas. After the announcement of the Nord Stream shutdown, prices have not only not risen, but have actually continued to fall. Of course, gas is still extremely expensive. It currently costs 6 times more than it did a year ago. Now, the fact that Putin's news has not pushed gas prices even higher is very telling. Still not surprised? Well, here comes another fact. The European Union wanted to have its natural gas deposits at 80% by the 1st of November. Well, that target was already exceeded at the beginning of September. At the time of making this video, Europe had filled 85.6% of its gas reserves. In other words, with hardly any Russian gas, Europe already has enough reserves to last until Christmas. What's more, with energy-saving measures, these reserves could last even longer. Yes, it is true, this winter will be lights out for the Eiffel Tower, and so for many other iconic monuments at night. It's not going to be an easy winter, and some countries may even have to establish some kind of rationing or limitations. But rest assured, the gasmageddon can be avoided. The question now is, how? Where is Europe getting the natural gas to replace Russian gas? How are the astronomical electricity price hikes going to be solved? And more importantly, why do we say that Russia is much worse off than it seems? Today, we're going to answer all of these questions, but first, let's look at some history. One of the biggest criticisms of capitalism is that it benefits the rich, right? Well, there are times when that is true, and this is one of them. Now, do you know exactly who the rich are in this story? It's the European Union. Let me spell it out clearly. Europe has money. And since Europe has money, it's done an Uncle Scrooge McDuck and has taken over almost the entire gas market at the stroke of a pen. We saw it here in a previous video of this series. The gas market in 2022 looks like a Turkish bazaar. How much is Pakistan paying you for that shipload of gas? You know what? It doesn't matter. I don't care. I'll pay you more. What's the conclusion then? As you can see in this graph, the price of gas rose throughout the summer. That's because Europe was willing to pay a fortune for all those liquefied natural gas tankers to divert their route to European shores. Thanks to all this, natural gas reserves have been filled in record time, despite Russia. All of this provides a lifeline that may last until Christmas. But not only that, the chart we are comparing, the one which you have already seen in other media, are the spot prices. That is, the prices of gas futures with immediate expiration. Now then, check out this other chart. Here you can see the gas futures in the long term. For example, if we buy a Dutch gas future with a maturity date of 2026, it costs us almost the same as it did before the war. Well, what this means is that gas investors, who have much more information than the average person, expect gas prices to go down. And why, may you ask? Because little by little, new alternatives to Russian gas are appearing. For example, Norway is exploiting gas at record levels, but without a doubt, the new super gas supplier is the United States. We've already talked about this before on VisualPolitik. Uncle Sam is exporting more gas to Europe than ever before. But I know what you're thinking. If you're a long-time follower of VisualPolitik, you already know that almost all of this new gas coming to Europe is not coming through pipelines. It does so via liquefied natural gas, or LNG. And this gas has one very big problem. To buy LNG, you need to have a regasification plant in your country. In other words, the gas comes out of the field and gets turned into a liquid. Thanks to this, it can be transported by ship. But once it arrives at its destination, it needs to be converted back into a gas again, right? This requires so-called regasification plants. Well, until now, Europe had very few such plants. Germany, for example, does not have any. The gas came through pipelines, which was much cheaper. Almost all the regasification plants were in Spain. But Spain is an energy island. It is barely connected with the rest of the continent. So the question is, how is it possible that Europe can suddenly buy so much LNG overnight? The answer lies, again, in capitalism. Because Europe is wealthy and can put money on the table, miracle solutions appear that are previously unthinkable. Something similar to what happened with the COVID vaccine. And believe me, there is a lot of money on the table right now. Check this out.
Germany earmarks €3 billion for floating LNG terminals.
I present to you a new prodigy of technology, floating natural gas regasification terminals, also known as FSRUs. Well, this is much faster and much cheaper. An FSRU costs between $400 and $500 million. It takes about 3 years to build each one. But it can be done even faster and cheaper. How? By converting methane tankers into floating terminals. This can be done. In fact, it's actually a very fast process. It can take between 18 months and cost between $100 million and $150 million. And because they are floating terminals, they can be moved from one place to another in a matter of months. To give you an idea, right now there are 48 floating terminals in the world and 558 LNG tankers. That is, ships carrying liquefied natural gas. In 2021, Europe had only 4 floating terminals, but that is changing fast. If you remember, natural gas is measured in BCMs, that is billions of cubic meters of gas. Well, at the time of making this video, the Netherlands already has 2 floating terminals that can process 14 new BCMs. The Czech Republic, which is landlocked by the way, has already contracted 3 BCMs from one of these terminals. But the case of Germany is even more impressive. Germany has already secured 6 floating plants. 3 of them are going to be ready for operation by Christmas. And now, let's do a little maths here. Last year, Germany bought 45 to 50 BCMs of natural gas from Russia. Well, with the regasification capacity they have already contracted, Germany will be able to import between 40 and 45 BCMs of natural gas. In other words, by next winter, Germany will be able to do without almost all Russian gas, at least as far as the receiving infrastructure is concerned. So now, the race is on to find suppliers. But, as we have told you, the good news for Europe is that the old continent has money. Obviously, the rising cost of supply will affect the economy, but not as much as a full Gasmageddon would. But this is not the only big news. At the time of making this video, Germany and Spain are trying to boost the construction of a gas pipeline that would connect Spain with the rest of Europe. In other words, there is an alternative to Russian gas. That is, if France stops blocking the pipeline, by the way. But I know what many of you are thinking. Okay, yes, checkmate Russia and whatever you want, but who's paying my electricity bill? I can't make ends meet as it is. Is there a solution for this? Well, we're gonna find that out now.
Avoiding Gasmageddon.
Europe is rich and has money to pay for gas. However, not all Europeans are rich enough to pay the diabolical prices of the latest energy bills. And this is where an interesting question comes in. The Czech Republic is one of the countries where the price of electricity is rising the most. However, the Czechs have a nuclear power plants which account for 18% of their mix. Isn't nuclear supposed to be cheap energy? How is it possible that this does not lower the electricity bill? This is where our friend, the marginal price system, comes in. That is, the price of electricity is set by the most expensive source. You see, every country has a company, usually state-owned or with close ties to the state, that manages the national electric grid. These entities are the ones that buy the energy from the nuclear power plants, solar farms, gas plants, and they sell it to the electricity companies. Every day, that company conducts an auction to cover all the electricity demand of that day. For example, let's imagine that Spain expects to consume 30,000 megawatts of energy today. Open the auction and the cheapest sources such as nuclear come in. Remember that nuclear plants operate continuously, so regardless of the price, they are going to supply electricity. Their price is €0. They are going to sell no matter what. Then come green energies, which are more expensive, then coal, hydroelectric, etc. And finally, we come to gas. The price of gas is skyrocketing. Gas plants cannot sell below a certain amount, let's say €190 per megawatt hour. Well, the price per megawatt for that day would be €190. That is the marginal pricing system, and it has been working very well for years. However, it was not designed for war conditions. So what is happening now? Well, the classic energy producers, nuclear, green, etc., are making extraordinary profits. So who are the big losers? Exactly, the consumers and the energy companies that buy the gas in the international market. Think about it. When, for example, Iberdrola buys energy from the Spanish power grid operator, it is paying prohibitive prices. But in many cases, consumers pay flat rates for electricity. Think about it. Let's use the UK for an example, right? When British Gas buys energy from the UK's power grid operator, the National Grid, it is paying prohibitive prices. But in many cases, consumers pay flat rates for electricity. In other words, there are not only consumers who cannot make ends meet, there are also many electricity companies across Europe that are sharply reducing their benefits or are even on the verge of bankruptcy. And that explains news like this.
German energy company Uniper asks for bailout.
So how can all this be solved? The debate is on the table right now. Some countries want to intervene in the pricing system. Instead of setting prices by auction, they would be set by the state. This would disrupt the energy market and break legal certainty. In the long term, it would create nothing but problems. What other solution can be applied then? Very easy. Those who have the most should pay the most. And who are they? Exactly, the energy producers. We are talking about imposing a tax on the extraordinary profits being earned by the owners of nuclear plants, solar farms, windmills, etc. These taxes would be used to pay for two things: possible bailouts for electricity companies and subsidies for consumers who are drowning in electricity bills. On the other hand, other countries, such as Germany, are taking other types of drastic solutions to avoid further distortions. Solutions like this one.
Germany seizes Russian oil firm Rosneft's refineries, the ones that are on German soil.
Conclusion? The situation is changing day by day, but there are several ways to avoid Gasmageddon. Yes, it is true. This winter, we are going to see cities half turned off. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona will not turn on its lights at night, and we're all going to be paying hefty bills. But there will be gas in winter, and there is money to give aid to avoid social problems. And now, a curious fact. Do you remember that Ferris wheel that Putin had inaugurated in Moscow? Well, it closed due to technical problems just a day after its opening. And this is a very symbolic figure of what is happening in Russia. As we've already covered on our sister channel, Visual Economic, the strength of the Russian ruble is the only good indicator they have. But keep two things in mind. One, the gas and oil that Russia sold to Europe accounted for 45% of all of its exports. In other words, at the moment, Russia has a hole in its public accounts as gigantic as the electricity bills that Europeans are currently paying. Two, the cost of the war. At the moment, the Kremlin has announced a partial military mobilization. That is, to force many young Russians to go to war. This would not only have a political cost, but also an economic cost. You have to train, arm, and feed hundreds and thousands of soldiers. Meanwhile, Putin has already met with Xi Jinping, hoping for support from China, which is not forthcoming. China remains on the sidelines in the Ukraine war. In fact, the Kremlin is so desperate to get ammunition and weaponry from abroad that it may be buying from North Korea, hence my awesome t-shirt. For the moment, Beijing's support for Moscow remains at the level of lip service, and India is already beginning to pressure Russia to end the war. In other words, Putin is increasingly in trouble. He has lost all his bargaining chips in Europe, he has lost his main source of income, and he is losing the war. But we'll talk about that in more detail in future videos. For now, the question is over to you. Do you think the Russian economy is going to collapse? Do you think these measures will be enough for Europe to avoid Gasmageddon this winter? Or maybe we'll see new gas price hikes? You can leave me your answer in the comments below. And as always, don't forget that here on VisualPolitik, we release new videos every week. Subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell button down there so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like this video, like it so we know. All the best, and I'll see you next time.